Sound bites on cubradio.com.
I want to get a little bit of background information on you here, Luke. Maybe you could give us a little bit of background information as to what got you where you are.
Well, I was always fascinated by the story of the first Indian to play baseball. And it came upon me from, if you're a certain age, you probably recognize the fireside books of baseball. There were 3 of them, and they were presents given for, Christmas, bar mitzvahs. And there was an article called The Wild Irishman and the Gentle Indian. Must have read this when I was in middle school. The Wild Irishman was Ed Delahanty, who I believe is the only Hall of Famer to either jump or fall drunk off a bridge into Niagara Falls, and one of the great hitters, and Louis Sockalexis, who played for the Cleveland Spiders, a Native American, in 1897, had more ability than anyone had ever seen, and drank himself out of baseball, destroyed himself very quickly. And years later, this story, the more I learned about America, about the closing of the frontier, the history of baseball, how the National League had like 16 teams in the 1890s, origin of the phrase, the big league, and I just was fascinated by this story. And in the book, The Answer is Baseball, which is a nonfiction book looking for the best baseball question ever asked, there's a chapter called The Riddle of the Indian, and I did research on the actual Indian and continued to be so fascinated by the story that I wrote a novel called The Cleveland Indian, which is very much a fictionalized account because the Indian in the novel is violent and political, wants to take over the team, and it's just a fascinating story.
Wow, there's so much history with the game. It's like sometimes you forget about how much time has passed and how different things were when something like the World Series, I guess, was back in its infancy.
That's absolutely right. By the way, the National League started the same year Custer lost his scalp, 1876.
Wow.
And there was a Chicago team, which I think may have been called White Stockings, then Colts, and that is the team that is the Cubs, which is the only team that stayed in the same place from 1876, because, of course, the American League started in 1901. And the reason that the original Cleveland Indian, Louis Sockalexis, is so important is, in fact, the team is named for him. And this was discovered by research by someone who, ironically, went to the same prep school. I went to the Hun School, Jamie Bonaparte, went through all the Cleveland Plain Dealers from 1913 because there was a story that the editor of the Plain Dealer, owner of the Cleveland American League team, and some old-time reporters sat around, presumably drinking whiskey and smoking cigars, and thought about renaming the team, which had been called Naps after Napoleon LaJoie and a series of other names, and actually said, we're going to call them Indians because we all remember Lou Sockalexis. And the reason this is important is a woman academic had gotten a lot of publicity saying, I read the Plain Dealer, there's no account of this, this is just racist, it's not named for Sockalexis. Well, what the man who went to my prep school did was he read the Sunday papers as well, and it was on the editorial page on a Sunday in 1913 when this story is verified. Yes, we sat around, and so the team is the only major league team actually named for an individual. And now, of course, I certainly understand the controversy over Chief Wahoo. Chief Wahoo is awful, and I believe that is that Indian with the huge nose and
the mascot. Yeah,
yeah, right. Should a human being be a mascot? And if you were to say that caricature was, say, of a Jew or an Armenian or a Greek, or you pick it, it wouldn't wash. I believe the Indians are distancing themselves from Chief Wahoo, but I defend the name. We're not talking about Redskins. We're talking about a name for a specific person, but not the logo.
Like the Cleveland Browns, for instance.
That's right. They were not named for people of color. they were named for their great coach.
Or just the color brown.
Right.
When I remember growing up as a kid thinking, what a goofy nickname.
I know it, because there wasn't another nickname like it. Now, of course, we live in an era where every minor league team tries to have a more exotic nickname. And, of course, it's to sell T-shirts and marketing and hats. But that's okay. If you want a Lansing Lugnuts T-shirt, I'm sure you have a minor league team near you that probably has an exotic name.
Oh, probably, yeah. Yeah, there's a few goofy ones out there. Now, the Cleveland Indians, by the way, long history, obviously, and when was the last time that they actually won the World Series? They were in the 2016 World Series here against Chicago. When was the last time they won?
Oh, boy. It was 1948, and interestingly enough, do you know who they beat in that World Series?
No.
It's the only other Native American baseball team. They beat the Boston Braves in 6 games. That was a team with Bob Feller, an excellent team, and something that I don't think was mentioned enough during the World Series, because we know about the controversy over the name, but that team had the first black player in the American League, Larry Doby, who came a year after Jackie Robinson had come in the other league to the Brooklyn Dodgers. And then what also had happened to the Indians was in 1954, they broke the string of 5 straight pennants of the New York Yankees, won the American League pennant, won 110 games, absolute powerhouse team, and then lost in 4 games to the New York Giants in the World Series with that opening game, Willie Mays making that fantastic catch that we've all seen, where he seems to run 500 feet to the center field, the enormous center field of the Polo Grounds. And journeyman player named Dusty Rhodes hit a pinch hit home run to win the first game and then hit more home runs in the series. And it was considered one of the biggest upsets and biggest collapses in series history. And then, of course, the Indians lost in the 1990s. So they have now their curse. Now, whether you want to call it the curse of Chief Wahoo or whatever, and I hope they'll be back in the World Series, but, they need a number 2 and number 3 starter. That's a good team, but it's not quite a great team, whereas the Cubs have the look of a team that's going to be there for a long time. That could be a dynasty, because not only they have a great young team, they have the brilliant Theo Epstein running it, and they have the money to hold on to players that they need. So I look for them, like the Red Sox, who broke their curse with Theo Epstein as GM. I look for them to win 2 or 3 World Series in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, when you mentioned about how good the roster and how young they are about the Chicago Cubs, the first thing that popped into my head was a few years back when they hired Theo Epstein. He came from the Sox, didn't he, the Red Sox?
Not only did Theo Epstein come from the Sox, but he is from a fascinating family. His father, Leslie Epstein, is a novelist, wrote probably the best Holocaust novel, King of the Jews. And the reason I know this is he ran the creative writing program at Boston University, where I went and am a graduate and became very good friends of the Epsteins. And who knew that Leslie's 10-year-old son was going to be the general manager of the Red Sox that broke the curse? And furthermore, Theo's grandfather and great-uncle were Hollywood scriptwriters, the Epstein twins, and they wrote Casablanca and many other famous movies. So you're talking about a really extraordinary family. And I was so sorry when Theo left the Red Sox. I believe, he had been a protege of Larry Lucchino, who had hired him as a summer intern in Baltimore, liked him, took him to San Diego, and actually said to him, if you want to be a GM, the way players are only going to respect you in 2 ways. One, if you were a former player, which you're not, or 2, if you're a lawyer and can talk to their agents as an equal. And so he sent Theo to San Diego State Law School. Very interesting, but of course there was tension between them, sort of perhaps a father-son thing. Now they're both gone, and it's a mistake. I wish Lucchino had gone first and Theo were still here. But, look for him to always do the most intelligent thing, to make the most intelligent move. As his father said to me, it may not work all the time, but you can bet Theo will have considered all the alternatives and make the smartest move. So I'm envious that you have Theo.
Professor Luke Salisbury, our guest here this morning, a sports expert and author of The Answer is Baseball, among a couple of other things. Now, Professor Salisbury, before we let you go here, the 2016 World Series, we've been discussing the Indians, we've been discussing the Cubs, and now we bring them together at the 2016 World Series. A lot of people considering it now maybe one of the best World Series ever played.
I think it was one of the best World Series. I look at World Series as either David and Goliath, say the 1960 series when the Pirates knocked off the Yankee team of Mandel Maris and Whitey Ford, or a meeting of giants like 1968. The Cardinals and the Tigers were both great teams. And I would say this series was more of a David and Goliath because I think clearly the Indians were the underdog. And I was rooting for the Indians because of the Cleveland Indians and because I'm an American League fan. If the Yankees aren't in it, I totally understand how it would feel to be a Cub fan, waiting your whole life to win a championship. And I think it was one of the great World Series. I myself might not say it was the greatest. Had the Indians won, I'd put it right up there as one of the great David and Goliath series. But it sure was fun, wasn't it?
Exactly. You need a little bit of a story, too. When you mentioned the David versus Goliath ones, the one that I think of off of the top of my head, remember when, was it the Arizona that defeated the Yankees?
Oh, yeah, with Curt Schilling.
Yeah.
And, yeah. Curt Schilling, who's to the right of Donald Trump and is threatened to run for the Senate in Massachusetts against Elizabeth Warren. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but I wish he were still on ESPN because when Curt Schilling talks about pitching, he really knows what he's talking about. When he talks about politics, he's stepping in something else.
Well, Professor, I am up against it a little bit here. You and I could probably talk about this stuff for
some time. Listen, I have a website, LukeSalisbury.com, if anybody's interested in what I've been up to and my books. And it's really been fun talking to you.
You got it. You got it. Have a great rest of your day. And again, thanks for being with us today.
Hey, thank you.